This is my band, The Sound of Modesty's brand new playback and monitor rig. And in total, this cost us just under £1,000 to put together, and I'm gonna show you how I did it. Now, you don't need me to tell you that big professional monitor rigs are profoundly expensive, let alone a playback and a monitor rig. For example, I'm used to being around this all the time. Not this, this. This is Loath's rig. I don't know how much it costs, but I can definitely tell you that it costs way more than $1,000. It can take in 48 channels of audio, mix that out to 6 stereo mixes, and send that out wirelessly through 6 wireless transmitter units. 4 for the band and 2 for the crew. And how did I manage to do all of that for under $1,000? Well, the truth of the matter is I didn't. So the first thing we're gonna have to do is manage expectations. So instead of 48 channels, we're gonna have 8. Instead of 6 individual monitor mixes, we're gonna have 3. And instead of 6 wireless transmitter units, we're gonna have 1. Manage expectations. That really isn't a deal breaker at all. In fact, for a band like The Sound of Modesty, playing pub gigs and small cap venues, this has been an incredible game changer for us. We're playing a lot tighter now because we can hear ourselves properly, and we're playing to a click. And it's helped our show sound a lot better because we're able to play a lot of the production elements out through the stereo tracks. That's just something we've not been able to do before. So, let's go through the rig, shall we? At the heart of any monitor rig is the mixer. This is where we're gonna take all of our drums, guitars, keys, vocals, whatever, all of our inputs, and mix them out for our ears to hear. And for our rig, the mixer is the Roland Octa-Capture interface. It's got 8 inputs, it's got 8 outputs, it's MIDI capable, and I've had this thing for literally 8 years. Yeah, the only reason this thing is even in this rig is because I've just had it. It's just been sitting around ever since I switched to the SSL interface. There are honestly way more capable mixers in a similar 1U format. One that comes to mind right now is the PreSonus Studio Live 12. It's, you know, an actual dedicated mixer for this kind of job. But for my band's needs, the Roland Octa-Capture interface will do. Price-wise, Roland has discontinued this many years ago, but you can find these secondhand for about £200. But we can't just take all of our inputs and just plug them into the inputs of our mixer and just call it a day. We need to make a copy of our inputs so that the front of house can still be receiving them, and then we can receive a copy of it so that we can mix it for our ears and front of house can mix it for the audience. But remember, we're limited to 8 inputs. Drums are gonna be the biggest issue, with them taking up at least 6 channels. So instead of that, we're just gonna have 3 channels for drums. Expectations. And from there, we've got 2 guitars, 1 bass, a mono input for keys, sorry Devin, patient, and an input for a vocal, and that's our 8 channels all taken up now. So now that we've got our 8 channel input list, we need to find a way of splitting that so that front of house gets a copy and that we get a copy for the front of house mix and for our mix. And this is where the Behringer MS8000 comes in. It's got 8 inputs and it's got a pair of outputs for each input. And price-wise, this was actually the cheapest part of the rig, coming in at just £57. One thing to note right now is to be aware of which outputs you're plugging your mixer to and which outputs will be going to front of house. One of the outputs is a direct one-to-one physical connection to the input on the front. On the outputs, that's labeled as link out, whereas the other output is a transformer isolated output, which is conveniently labeled by a little icon that looks like a schematic for a transformer. That isolated output will not pass through phantom power. So what I've got here is just an XLR cable. I don't have anything at home that actually requires phantom power. Now I'm just gonna plug it into input 7 and make sure that it's actually plugged into a transformer out. So that's currently plugged into isolated out, or transformer out, I guess. If I put one in pin 1 and the other one in literally any other pin, and if I go to input 7, so phantom power's off, phantom power's on, and yeah, there's nothing. There's no 48 volts coming through at all. Whereas if I were to plug back into link out, now it's back into link out, and turn the phantom power on. There you go. We got 48 volts coming through, just a bit shy of it, but you know, phantom power nonetheless. So what this means is, if you want to be able to rehearse with it, you'll plug all of the inputs for the mixer to the link outs on the split, which are the direct one-to-one physical connections to the inputs. So you can provide phantom power from your own mixer and rehearse with it for anything like overhead mics or DI boxes or anything like that. And for hearing ourselves wirelessly, we've got the LD Systems U505 transmitter and 2 receiver packs, one for our singer Yvonne and one for me. For Devin and Ned, the keys player and drummer of the band, they'll be hardwired directly into the rig because they're not physically able to move anywhere on stage, so they don't need to be wireless. And for Oscar, our bass player, he can just get this really long headphone cable that's plugged into the headphone out of the interface. Sorry, Oscar. I should note as well, the reason that we went with the LD Systems U505 versus something like a little bit cheaper like the X5 or something like that is because this is about as cheap as you can go while still being able to pick and tune to specific frequencies. From my experience on the road, there's been many times where we've run into interference on our wireless units, and the easiest solution to that is literally just pick another frequency. Last but not least, we just need to figure out what the 8 outputs of this mixer is gonna do what. So outputs 1 and 2, that's hardwired to this headphone out, so that's gonna be Oscar's mix, the bass player's mix. Outputs 3 and 4, that will be for our keys player Devin. He'll be connected to it with a long pair of cables that will plug into a headphone amp that he'll be able to plug his ears into. And for outputs 5 and 6, those are gonna be feeding the inputs of this U505. And conveniently as well, there's also a headphone out on this U505, so our drummer Ned will plug straight into that, and that will be his headphone mix as well. And lastly, outputs 7 and 8, those will be for the stereo playback tracks for any kind of tracks that we'll be playing along to during our show. Unfortunately, one of the biggest parts about this rig that saved us the most money, aside from using a cheap interface as mixer, is making our own XLR cables. I say unfortunately because not everyone knows how to make their own XLR cables. In our case, 4 of the 8 inputs were on the front of the interface, which meant in order to have tidy cable management and for the lid on this to even be able to close properly, we needed low profile right angle XLR cables. These are very expensive, costing upwards of at least £27 each. Multiply that out 8 times, we're looking at least £220 just in XLRs. Contrast that to £30 for literally 50 meters of XLR cables, and £120 for a pair of male and female low profile XLRs. That saved us at least £70 in just making our own XLRs. So if you know how or are willing to learn how to make your own XLRs, I'd highly recommend doing that for any kind of build like this, especially when you'll be needing custom lengths so that the inside of the rig isn't just like a spaghetti of XLR cables. One of my favorite parts of this build is feeding all the XLR cables for the front panel through that little hole and then soldering on the plugs and plugging them in. It just looks so satisfying. I'm really proud of that bit. And now the last thing we need to do is just make sure that all of our outputs is routed correctly in both the interface's software and in our playback session. So what's cool about this interface is that along with the 8 analog outputs that we have on the back of the interface, we've also got 10 digital outputs that we can route to in our DAW, and then we can send to any of the 8 analog outs. So this is the playback that we have for our song Metamorphosize. So if we go to, like, I don't know, this bit. So we've got click. So that's going to output 3, which is not the physical output 3 on this interface. Instead, it is this digital output 3. So I'm going to cycle through all the different physical outputs. You're not going to be able to hear this, but digital mixer A is outputs 1 and 2. Mixer B is 3 and 4. Mixer C, that's the one we're hearing, is 5 and 6. Mixer D, those are the tracks, so everything's muted aside from the tracks. So across the different mixers, you can see the click is at different levels for different people's preferences on how they like their click. And mixer D, that's for our playback tracks, that's everything's muted aside from the playback tracks. So if I play around with this level, you can hear it go up and down. But then if I do it on someone else's mix, that's not affected at all, which is really cool. So we've got lots of different outputs. We've got clicks, we've got guide, that's just the actual song. Guide's going to the stereo outs, which is 1 and 2. These ones, sorry that was very loud. We've got, these are the actual tracks. So that's the actual playback tracks that's going to be going out to front of house. Then we also have cues, which is fun. So this is for like the start of songs. Here.
Metamorphosize. 1, 2, 3, 4.
That's going to output 4. So if I loop that, I guess.
Metamorphosize.
You can see that's
1, 2, 3,
affecting
4.
it there for my mix, but doesn't affect it for anyone else's mix.
1, 2.
We also have track guitar for Safe in Your Arms. That's the only song where our singer Yvonne doesn't also play guitar. So we've got track guitar on that one. Just pan slightly to the right. Yeah, so the thing to note from this is that the outputs on your DAW are not the same as the outputs on the interface. There's a separate layer which is all these digital outs here that you can route to all of analog outputs that you have on the interface. And there you go. That is the rig. Everything fits neatly into this 3U rack hard case, and all we need to do is show up to a gig, take off the front panels, and plug in our inputs, and we're ready to go. Now, I'm gonna be honest, we haven't actually played a show with that rig yet. All we've done so far is just use it in rehearsals, but even then, it's proven itself absolutely invaluable. Like I said, we're playing a lot tighter now, simply because we can hear ourselves in so much more clarity. But not only that, it's gonna help our shows sound so much better now, because we can actually incorporate a lot of the production elements that we work so hard on in our songs as part of our show through the tracks that's coming out of the rig. So, if you wanna see this rig in action, we're playing a co-headline show on July 3rd at the Lending Room in Leeds. We're co-headlining with the amazing math rock band Patience. So if you're in or around the Leeds area on July 3rd, get yourself a ticket to the show and come say hello and check out the rig in action. I hope you guys enjoyed this walkthrough of my band's Playback and Monitor rig. Hopefully some of you guys will take some ideas from this rig and incorporate into your own rig builds. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care, guys. Bye. Come to the show!